Hi, everyone. This is John Daly with BQB Publishing. I am here today with Bob Vacanti Jr., debut author of the fantasy sci-fi novel War of the Faith into Liminatum. I hope I pronounced that correct.
That's
Bob, how's it
correct.
going today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations on your first book. That is a
Thank you.
huge accomplishment. Getting it out there in the world has to be very exciting for you, I'd imagine.
Yeah, extraordinarily satisfying, exciting, slightly terrifying, all of those things.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Can you tell everyone a little bit about your background and what got you interested in writing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from the Midwest, born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm soon to be a 40-year-old. I got a writing and linguistics degree at the University of Nebraska at Omaha back in the mid 2000s, and have been working in the corporate world ever since. Data entry and IT project management mostly. I would say that my desire to write this book increased as I started to get a little strung out in the IT world, and I started to, go into my world and fantasize and build into it. And about 5 years ago, I already had like several chapters written, and they kind of were put on the shelf as I was going through life, and just always wanted to tell a story and really put the pen to paper, so to speak. So eventually, I took a hiatus from the IT world. I want to say at the beginning of 2023, and I just wrote wrote until the story was done. And I found you fine folks at BQB. Thank you again for helping me get this book to market, and it's been a great journey, and I'm very excited about it because first and foremost, I'm just kind of a nerd. I've always been interested in fantasy everything, whether it's reading Dune books or Lord of the Rings, or video games like the Final Fantasy series and Fantasy Star series. I'm a big video game nerd, and even anime when I was really young, watching basically anime Dungeons and Dragons called Record of Lodoss War, or like Vampire Hunter D, stuff like that. It's like big inspirations for me, and I've always wanted to make my own world and tell a story. I mean, actually, I wanted to make a video game, but I kind of discovered that was a little bit more involved than perhaps I was willing or able to handle at the time. So I started writing instead, and War of the Faith was the result. So
Well, excellent. No, that's funny. That's funny you mentioned that because I'm a novelist too. I write the Sean Coleman thriller series. I don't want to bring myself into
oh,
this too much,
please.
but I'm from the software development world. I was very much involved in that. Really kind of needed an escape as well, and that's what got me into creative
Absolutely.
writing. And there was another one of our authors. I can't remember who it was now, but a few months ago I interviewed, and they were the same thing. So there is something to that. You get into this world of logical, of coding, of tech stuff, and there is sort of, I think, this creative need to sort of get outside of that and do
Yeah.
this sort of thing. So I find that interesting. Well, let's talk about the book. Can you tell people what War of the Faith is about?
Yeah, so War of the Faith into Liminatum is about a book of a war-torn land, Waldea, and a former noble girl, Gwendolyn Carlyle, who is kind of her father disappears, and she's ripped from the lap of luxury and made a ward to the state of Grenova, one of the commonwealths. This book takes place about 20 years or annums after the War of the Faith, as it were. So Waldea was invaded by a fanatical religious empire and basically subjugated for a couple years until a mysterious group of people came literally flying over this giant chasm separating the Waldean Peninsula from the mainland, and they helped save the day and save Waldea from utter subjugation and destruction. But then they disappear for 2 decades. They suddenly return, shortly before the beginning of the story begins, and they're helping the plateau build a new life, and kind of scrape themselves out of poverty. And but with it, they bring this technology, these new mechanisms, these wonders that kind of change the way people see the world and how they operate within it. So, on one hand, you have this like war torn land who doesn't even allow religious expression. They've flat out forbidden it because they're afraid that a new religious fervor would grip the land and they'd be swept into another holy war. And then you have this new like technological revolution going on where everything's being modernized and transformed in a way that's kind of too much for a lot of the people to deal with. And it's also causing murmurs of new and old religions to kind of bubble up, and there are pockets of power behind the scenes that are basically working to effectuate their beliefs or their system, or maintain the status quo, or to replace it with this new religion. So all the characters, Gwendolyn and her friends, basically get swept up in this growing strife in the land, and it's they're trying to prevent another war of the faith from culminating in the plateau. So
Wow, that's really fascinating. This is really sort of an epic story, isn't
I
it?
hope so.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I get a lot of thought has gone into that. That's very fascinating. What do you find most rewarding about writing fiction? More specifically, in this fantasy and science fiction genre, where you can maybe have a little more room for artistic expression. You can create your own worlds and that sort of thing. What do you find most rewarding about that?
Yeah, I would say that first and foremost, it is tantamount to like good mental fitness. Like I'm a very fit person. I like to exercise, run, work out, stuff like that. And for the longest time, I kind of neglected the opposite side of the coin. Like everything is a muscle. Your brain's a muscle, your imagination's a muscle. So like you kind of leave it alone for a long time, and then you kind of assume that you don't have a creative component in your brain, or that you're not really suited to that. And for most of my professional career, I was relegated to more technical communication in the IT world and everything. So when that itch to be creative and to use my imagination kind of went full force, I kind of just fell in love with it. And being able to uh, create all the cool little concepts of systems of magic, or of warfare, or of like fantasy, but in perhaps a more like modern context. And it's quite exhilarating. I think everyone, especially people who think that they aren't creative, should give it a shot, because like anything, it's a muscle, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more you get from it. And also, I love writing fiction because, again, to reiterate on the previous point, the corporate world, it does not allow a lot of room for creativity, and I think that that needs to be expressed through one avenue or another, whether it's through your family life or your home decorating. I mean, I think people find a way to be creative even if they don't realize it. But I really felt burned out in that setting, and I think it was quite it kind of like rewired the way that I think about this world, and the way I think about proverbial worlds. And it's just very fulfilling, I think, to tell a story like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, on the flip side of that question, what would you say is most challenging or the hardest part about writing in this genre, fantasy and science fiction?
Well, I would say a couple things. First and foremost, the adage is, there's nothing new under the sun. So one of my biggest fears that I had to overcome is the fear that I was gonna just write something utterly derivative, or uninspiring or uninteresting, because we're ultimately, I had to get over the fact that, like, I, as a writer, am kind of on the shoulders of previous thinkers and writers, and that none of my concepts are going to be wholly unique, but it's just the way that you tell them, and the characters and their emotional arcs and everything, that really makes the story compelling. And so I had to convince myself to relax on that front. Too much, and I think a lot. To the point where I get analysis paralysis sometimes, and sometimes you just gotta like calm your mind a little bit and get done what you can. And if you feel that it's too bland or derivative. It's an iterative process, so you can always make it better and differentiate it in different personal ways. So that was a big challenge. Also, reminding myself that any new skill or hobby or activity that you do, you're more than likely going to stink at. Writing isn't, nobody learns how to play the piano like, Beethoven on the first go. It takes a lot of, you know, boring prose, a lot of, uh, darlings that you think are good at the time but you have to kill later, a lot of trial and error, and you just can't really beat yourself up enough to stop doing it. You just have to keep on writing until you eventually get better and you learn some things. And of course, having a wonderful editor, a couple editors helps too. But I would say that was the biggest thing, like just being my own worst critic. I have to just kind of allow myself some grace and go and let the process kind of culminate, and then here we are. So I managed to do it, I guess.
It really is a learning experience. I think there's, that sort of that old saying, the first book you write will always be the hardest one, because I think it really is. It's a lot of experimentation. I mean, my first book, 6 years, I think it took me to write, sort of on and off.
Yep,
And
that sounds about right.
yeah, yeah, and you learn, you teach yourself a lot of things. I think we have some similarities there. I think there's a tendency to come in as a perfectionist, to
Yes.
really get fixated on one paragraph or one sentence, and just, maybe if I do it this way, and there really is.
Rewrite it 30 times.
Exactly. There is really, and it's really, you have to keep telling yourself, I think, that it's okay. This is a first draft. You can come
Yeah.
back and perfect it in the second draft. And if you don't, I think if you don't look at it that way, you can get really hung up. But it doesn't hurt. I think in the end, it doesn't hurt what you've written, what someone's written, but it does prolong it. Make it.
Yeah.
But no, I totally empathize with that. Well, Into Liminatum is the first book in the War of Faith series, so there's
Mhm.
definitely more to come from you.
Yes.
How far into the next books are you?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because when I took my initial hiatus, I wrote what I suppose turned out to be like 1,000 pages, and so I wrote essentially two books in one go, which I kind of consider them now to be, sister volume, like part one and part two of volume one, and then if I'm, so lucky, I will eventually write volume two, which would be books three and four, which I kind of want to write as like sister texts as well. So like one and two complement each other, three and four complement each other, then both parts kind of come together. So I would say, I mean, I kind of have to repace the second one now that I've, split the baby, so to speak. But I mean, it's all for all intents and purposes done, give or take a couple chapters of, expansion. But yeah, so once I get this sorted and people, get their appetites whetted, about the series, I plan on getting to work, getting the second one in the market, and if people really like it, I'll keep going. I mean, I'm planning for hopefully a quadrilogy, if not just a trilogy. I don't want the characters in the world to overstay their welcome, because that's kind of one of my bigger fears is a up and coming author, is that uh, the world will be a certain size, and then I'll tell the stories that I wanted to tell, and then all of a sudden people are like, well, what happens to Gwendolyn next? Where's she at in 5 years or 10 years? Or and maybe I can find other unique ways for the characters to interact and grow. But sometimes you just have to say goodbye to characters after they've told their stories, or else I fear that perhaps they'll be diluted in the eyes of the readers, or that people think I'm just phoning it in to continue to make a living or something. So that, yeah, definitely three or four books is my goal there.
Well, excellent. And for people who get hooked on the first book, they may not have to wait all that long for the
Yeah,
next one to
no.
come out. So that's a great advantage when you're writing a series. Um, what advice would you give to first-time authors like yourself? You said you're almost 40. I consider you a young author. What would you give? What kind of advice would you give to people like you who dream of writing and completing a novel, but maybe doubt they can pull it off?
Yeah, so I would say, and if I'm oversimplifying it too much, I don't mean to belittle the actual complexity of the process itself, but I would just say, um, do the work first off, because you can brainstorm and you can outline that those are great first steps, but ultimately at a certain point you have to put proverbial pen to paper, and that can be the hardest step. I mean, you can have chapters and outlines and character arcs and everything kind of written out like D&D characters and campaigns and stuff, but it's really when you place the characters into the world, and if they're fully realized enough, then they'll start to act in their own organic ways and maybe like surprise you and have different directions than even you intended originally. So do the work. Number two, break it down into more digestible exercises. So it's not just like I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a book. It's, oh, I'm going to sit down and maybe I'll take 10 or 15 minutes of my time to write a paragraph or two about a character description. Like, what is this character? What does this character look like? What inspires this character? Or maybe you take a half an hour to write out the like scenery. Like what does Grenova look like? What does Waldea look like? And you can compartmentalize these things that in essence are the building blocks of a chapter or a book. But if you try to do it all at once, or if you sometimes you just got to do what you can, and those small rewards will inspire you and motivate you to continue doing more of the same, or even more. Like once you realize that you can write a couple paragraphs, in half an hour to an hour that you're satisfied enough with, then maybe you can, push your luck. Next week you can write, 5 paragraphs or however much. I mean, you'd be surprised at how, I mean, not you, but, people who haven't written might be surprised at how good they get at it. And I would also say, uh, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for not being the writer that you've always wanted to be at the beginning of the process. I mean, like you said, perfectionism. The enemy of perfect is the enemy of the good. Like if you just need the prose to shine off the page like on the first try, like that's not a good approach. I mean, perhaps you are that prolific or talented that you can do something like that, but I would like to think most people have to struggle with finding the proper flow or word combinations or character quirks, stuff like that. So just forgive yourself, do the work, break it down into digestible, achievable steps, and before you know it, you'll have written a chapter. Before you know it, you'll have written a book, and it just kind of cascades. You build momentum, and just don't give up. Don't beat yourself up about it. So
I think that's very sound advice, and I think that that message of self grace is very important. It's very easy to get frustrated, as a writer, even if you don't have writer's block, even if it's the ideas flow, but yeah, frustration can really do a number on a writer's psyche. So I think it's important, that perseverance. Well, Bob, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. Can you tell people how to find out more about you and your book series, War of the Faith?
yeah, sure. So I have a website, www.warofthefaith.com. Has a book trailer, some vendor links, a little snippet about the author. I don't go into too much. It's not like an autobiography or anything, but just a little, couple paragraphs about me. And as the book is released and is proliferated and people talk, I plan on making myself a bit more visible on various social media outlets. I haven't quite gotten to that step yet, but I do intend on maybe doing some readership outreach. Maybe, I mean, I've even humored the thought. I don't know how many people would even want to watch me play a video game, but I'm kind of a fan of video game let's plays, as they call them. So just maybe watch me play like a video game of some sort while I chat with the fan base and everything. I don't know. It's all up in the
Yeah,
air right now, but
trust me. I got a 20-year-old son who loves watching people play video games.
yes,
That's for people who aren't familiar with that culture. It's a big deal. People do enjoy that, so I think that's actually a great idea. But
Great.
Bob, I want to wish you the best of luck. War of the Faith will be out there. It's already available for order.
Yep.
People can go out wherever, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, their local bookstores. If they're not on the shelves, just ask your local bookstore and they'll
Yeah,
order one
please.
in. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Bob, and hope you have yourself a great day. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care.